Hi friends, your pal Scott Garibay, and today we are going to talk about we're going to talk about Chapter 2 of Stranger Things, the Weirdo. We're going to talk about Stranger Things. We're going to talk about Season 1, Chapter 2, the Weirdo on Maple Street. We're going to talk about it through the lens of me, a Dungeons & Dragons Dungeon Master, and specifically through the lens of one specific character, which is Will Byers. So at this point, Will is missing, and all of his friends are concerned, right? They're like, whoa, we played Dungeons and Dragons together, now he's gone, right? And at this point, it becomes public knowledge that Will Byers is gone. And at this point, also, 11 is now in play. So 11 has escaped the Hawkins laboratory, and she then meets Mike Wheeler, and Mike Wheeler takes her into his home and hides her in the basement of his house, right? And there's a lot here because I think it's impressive that I think we need to understand that one, Mike Wheeler's parents are fairly disconnected from their kids. They really don't have a good, strong relationship with them. The dad is completely disconnected. The mom is trying to reach out to the children, but the children rebuff her intentions to care for them and to do things with them, which is extremely sad. But the father works hard and provides enough to give this space to hide 11. Now, 11 is important to the story because right away, Mike Wheeler explains that their friend is missing. And 11 and then 11 looks at his Dungeons and Dragons material, and it's amazing how much the Duffer Brothers have written the importance of Dungeons and Dragons into this show. So she uses the map, the Dungeons and Dragons map, to explain that she can find Will Byers and that she believes he is in the Upside Down, right? Which is this supernatural realm, which, by the way, is 100% canon to Dungeons & Dragons. It has been literally written into Dungeons & Dragons through the Dungeons & Dragons Demogorgon Thessala Hydra starter set. So the Upside Down is a supernatural realm in Stranger Things. And then it's also a canon setting within Dungeons & Dragons now, which is pretty incredible. So at this point, she explains, hey, I can find Will, right? And I think he's in the Upside Down. Mike Wheeler gets very excited about this and explains this to Dustin Henderson and Lucas Sinclair. And right away, there is a division between Lucas Sinclair and 11. He does not trust her. And it does turn out that there's good reason to not trust her. At one point, she actually, she does betray them later, right? But only momentarily because they're still building their friendship. So I thought it was interesting. Dustin Sinclair, you're like, oh, he's being a jerk. But the reality is, 11 is an extremely complicated subject. And the idea that she is, that she has her own agenda and may not be thinking of Will first, it turns out to be correct, which is really fascinating. So at this point, all of the boys are really in on finding Will. We also now meet Will Byers' mother, right? And Will Byers' mother is really fascinating. And I think is it Joyce Byers? Yeah, it's played by Winona Ryder. But she is immediately very upset, and the other thing I think is really interesting is they show no one in the world cares about Will Byers the way his mother does. She genuinely cares for him. And I have to say, it really kind of touched my heart that Joyce Byers, like Will Byers' mother, really doesn't understand Dungeons and Dragons. She doesn't understand that the world that Will inhabits, but she cares about it nonetheless, and she really tries to understand it. And it really connected with me because my parents were very much like this. So I asked for the Dungeons and Dragons red box. I think I was when I was 12, And my parents bought it for me in the middle. Like, this was 1982. This was literally the middle of the Satanic Panic, and my parents were evangelical Christians. So how the heck did I get the Dungeons and Dragons red box? Well, the biggest thing is my parents were Christians, but they also were readers, and not just of the Bible. They read history, they read all kinds of material, and my parents were never afraid of any book in the world. And they wanted nothing more than for me to read. Right? Like, and one of the biggest reasons why is they wanted me to be a Christian, and they knew I couldn't be the best way for me to be a Christian was for me to read the Bible. So, God's plan of salvation exists in the written form. And so my parents had absolutely no fear of any book, right? And they were excited if I was ever asking for a book. The other thing I look back at now that I realize is, I asked my parents for a whole bunch of nonsense. I was like, hey, get me you guys are reading Lord of the Rings, and you read a bunch of novels, and you have hardback books on. But I was like, screw all that. I want these weird pamphlets in a red box that other people are telling you is demonic. Get it for me? And they're like, here you go. Right? And then the other thing was, they were like, hey, read these great books. These are really good. And I was like, screw that. Give me a bunch of comic books. I want all my reading to have, like pictures in them, and like to be 24 pages long and fall apart very easily. And my parents were like, here you go. And when I see the relationship that is beautifully crafted in Stranger Things season 1, episode 2, and we see Joyce and how much she cares for Will, and I have to say, I'm so lucky, right? Because I know my mom would have knocked holes in walls to find me if I'd ever been lost for even 5 minutes. And I have to say, the depiction of Winona Ryder as Will Byers' mother is really, we all love seeing 11, pick up a car, and you can't wait to see that part. But the glue that holds this story together is a mother's love for Will. And, and that's more, and frankly, it's more intense than the love of his friends. And it's even more intense than the love of his brother. And give your mom a call. Every single word you just heard in this video is my humble opinion. Nothing more, nothing less. The important part is when I get to hear your humble opinion, when you get in the comments and send your traffic. Please consider liking, subscribing, and have a fetch millennium.